these chemicals go through these processes called blending and granulation, and then sizing and tableting, and then pressing and then coating. And all of these disparate parts and components can create challenges because you're supposed to sample and analyze the quality metrics along the way.
Welcome to the Business of Healthcare podcast from the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management. The center is based at the Naveen Jindal School of Management at the University of Texas at Dallas. The show, like the center, brings together business leaders and other forward thinkers to discuss how best to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing, increasingly complex healthcare industry. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Kaiser, Director of the Master's Program in Healthcare Leadership and Management for Professionals. Today, we welcome Dr. Eric Edwards, co-founder and CEO of Richmond, Virginia-based Phlow Corp. That is spelled P-H-L-O-W. You'll definitely want to go Google Phlow. And when you do, you'll see this powerful message. End the shortage of essential medicines once and for all. Secure our nation's health, leading the way to U.S.-based advanced manufacturing. Welcome to the Business of Healthcare podcast, Eric.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's great to be with you.
Well, we have a lot to cover in a short period of time, especially on the topic of pharmaceuticals and their very important role in the business of healthcare. And at a high level of abstraction, I think we'd all agree that the pharmacy supply chain has numerous links, and to most of us, it's really confusing. So in this podcast, let's go deeper into the conversation to address some of the key problems we face as a nation that Phlow is addressing. Eric, Phlow is a public benefit corporation. What does that mean?
Well, Bob, Phlow is one of America's first public benefit corporations as a pharmaceutical manufacturer. And what that means to us is that we are focused on a new level of transparency, a new level of accountability as it relates to what we're trying to achieve as a company dedicated to impact. Specifically, we're a trailblazing essential medicine impact company focusing on reimagining the domestic production of essential medicines from start to finish using advanced manufacturing processes. And, unfortunately, as many of your listeners can appreciate, the pharmaceutical industry has been ridden with complexities, with opacity, with challenges, and trying to understand where's the value and where's the benefit. And I think I read in a Gallup poll a couple weeks ago that the pharmaceutical industry's reputation was second to last, only behind the United States Congress. And so I think that for us, we are hoping to shed a new light and provide hope on how a pharmaceutical company can respond as a company that is responsible, that is committed to social impact with strong governance, dedicated to transparency in pricing and affordability of medicines, to really just provide a new, renewed hope around what this industry can do for patients.
Wow, that is quite an order of challenge there. So in the news today, we hear a lot about a shortage of computer chips and our dependency on companies outside the United States for manufacturing. So tell us about manufacturing the supply chain for pharmaceuticals. How do we stand there?
So, Bob, I think all of your listeners would agree that the availability of an uninterrupted supply of fully domestic-made, life-saving medicines is essential for ensuring the nation's public health security. Unfortunately, the weaknesses in a global supply chain have meant chronic national shortages of essential critical medicines for a decade or more. And not so dissimilar to your example, whether it's semiconductors or rare earth minerals or petroleum. These are key industrial bases, and in particular, the pharmaceutical essential medicine industrial base. And active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, are one of those key industrial bases that we as a country need to start looking at from the perspective of them being a strategic asset, not just a commodity. So unfortunately, over the years, these drugs have been treated as commodities. It has resulted in massive drug shortages. And for example, between the years of 2008 and 2014, the number of essential medicine Life-saving medicine shortages increased by close to 400%. And the number of medicines in shortage with no acceptable substitute increased by 125%. COVID-19 just exacerbated a problem that has been around for over a decade, close to 2 decades. And we at Phlow are trying to reshore and refocus our efforts on bringing back this entire essential medicine manufacturing supply chain from initial ingredient and the active pharmaceutical ingredient all the way to the finished dosage form as a matter of national health security to try to end drug shortages.
So where do all these active pharmaceutical ingredients come from today? They're not made in the United States, or are they? What's the source for these today?
So nearly 3/4 of our active pharmaceutical ingredient supply are manufactured in facilities outside the United States, primarily, unfortunately, with a global over-reliance on China for our active pharmaceutical ingredient supply and in India. And unfortunately, even within India, there's data to suggest that they're receiving their active ingredients and raw materials from China. So even the active ingredients that we import from India, a lot of them are still coming from China. So when the pandemic broke and both India and China shut down exports of active pharmaceutical ingredients, and you can go back to March 2020, you can see the announcement from India who announced that 26 essential active ingredients were not going to be exported. They were going to keep them in the country of India. The US was essentially cut off from sourcing many vital medicines needed for treating patients with COVID-related illnesses, such as those that are needed to place patients on ventilators. So it really is an issue that has cropped up here. It really is a challenge that has presented itself because of a global over-reliance over the last 20 to 30 years of shifting our medicine supply chain, these critical essential medicines, key antibiotics, medicines to support blood pressure, sedation agents, medicines to get patients onto ventilators, and pain management drugs. Many of these critical essential medicines have been offshored. And so Phlow is working feverishly, keeping our heads down to reshore and bring back this critical medical infrastructure.
So we hear a lot today about electronic cars, EVs, electric vehicles, and the dependency on rare earth metals in order to make the fuel cells and batteries for these cars. And a lot of these rare earth materials are outside the country. Is that the case, that we don't have these basic fundamental ingredients, or did we just choose to depend on other countries to do it? Are we lacking that, or do we have the potential for sourcing that ourselves here in the country?
Yeah, unfortunately, year after year, there's been one manufacturing facility for these APIs, or as I said, active pharmaceutical ingredients, one after another has been shuttered. And we've shifted these jobs overseas. And there's a multitude of factors that have led to these challenges and vulnerabilities in our drug supply chain. Bob, some of these factors include the complexity, the vastness, and the multinational nature of drug supply, the economic pressures and other market influences that have been placed on these particular drugs. There's been reduced incentives for existing manufacturers to invest in upgrading equipment, improving their supply chains, expanding their capacity. We have a lack of redundant capacity in manufacturing. In fact, we have a just-in-time inventory management practice that limits inventory and reduces the ability to respond to surges in demand, such as what we faced through COVID-19 or what we faced through challenges that could manifest themselves with trade disagreements or disputes. The Suez Canal debacle that we saw, all of these things have an impact on assuring supply chain resiliency. And finally, since we moved these manufacturing bases outside the United States, we now have a geographic concentration of manufacturers outside the US that puts production at risk from these other items like natural disasters or climate change challenges, or even a trade dispute that can happen with China or any other foreign country. So this is a significant public health threat, and we're working again to try to understand the most vulnerable active ingredients in medicines, and then slowly but surely bring that back to the United States as a matter of a strategic asset in national health security.
Well, you talk about innovation and redefining, reinventing the process of manufacturing pharmaceuticals. For the benefit of our audience, I don't think anybody understands how these are actually manufactured and produced. We do have an understanding that the FDA has an extensive review process for certain drugs and approval and things like that. But the manufacturing process, how is that being done today? And how does Phlow change that or reinvent that to do something differently and the advantages of it?
So an FDA report actually recently highlighted the fact that when you look at the causes for drug shortages and drug challenges in the United States, over 60% of the challenges around drug shortages deal with manufacturing and quality problems. And a lot of those occur at the final drug product stage, but many also occur because of what we just talked about, that overly complex supply chain. The way drugs are manufactured today, I'll just describe, for example, a tablet. You have conventional batch manufacturing processes that feature many steps. They're often done in different facilities, which add delays to the final product. You have these bulk chemicals and raw materials that are synthesized. They're then crystallized, typically in one facility, then shipped to another facility where these chemicals go through these processes called blending and granulation, and then sizing and tableting, and then pressing and then coating. And all of these disparate parts and components can create challenges because you're supposed to sample and analyze the quality metrics along the way. And during these hold times, some materials are sensitive to environmental degradation and other challenges that can lead to impurities and quality issues. So that, coupled with the fact that the culture of quality is different at some of these facilities in some of these foreign countries. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes facilities try to produce medicines to meet the bare minimum standard to try to get through FDA approval, instead of designing quality into the manufacturing practice and making it, hey, we're not just going to do what we need to get by and get FDA approval. We're going to do what we need to assure that we have the highest quality product when this gets shipped to the American market for the American consumer, even if it's being made in China and India. And there's unfortunate many examples where that level of quality just was not part of a company's culture. So what we're trying to do at Phlow is tackle this from multiple angles, and we're trying to do so leveraging something called advanced continuous manufacturing, moving away from these traditional batch manufacturing processes that are ridden with potential for quality challenges, issues with scaling up, et cetera. And we're focusing on continuous manufacturing that's an alternative manufacturing method that utilizes flow reactors, allowing chemical reactions to run on a smaller scale over and over again until the entire volume of an active ingredient and a finished product has been produced.
Okay, so that's where the name Phlow comes from then, this continuous flow technology. I guess that's the basis for the name of the company, right? That's
right. It's about applying what's called flow chemistry and advanced continuous flow chemistry and many other advanced manufacturing processes to the production of medicine. And Bob, what's really interesting is continuous manufacturing has been occurring in this country for decades in other industries, the agriculture industry, the automotive industry, other chemical industries, but it has not yet been broadly applied to the pharmaceutical industry. Why? Well, it's capital intensive. It requires a lot of new regulation. And when you're a pharmaceutical company that's been making a compound a traditional batch manufactured way for years, and you're still able to have approval of that compound, why would you then want to improve your process? Well, there's lots of reasons why. It's just been capital intensive to do so. And so what we are doing is we're working with the federal government. So Phlow received a large government contract from the Department of Health and Human Services, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, and the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA, to apply advanced manufacturing processes to these essential medicine products. So the government's helping us stand up this infrastructure and helping us subsidize our research and development so that we can take a new look at how these drugs are made. Why? Why would we do that? Well, there are many advantages of continuous manufacturing. That includes the fact that product quality can be precisely controlled with modern automation and control systems that can be monitored during production using high resolution analytics. So what do I mean? You can see when the drug process is going out of spec. I can see live versus the batch process where you have to take a sample, then go test it. If it didn't pass the test, you got to throw it away or make some adjustments. But in a continuous process, we can see when things are out of specification and make adjustments, leading to higher quality. The high technology computer control production facilities are better able to rapidly respond to changes in demand because they don't have the equipment scale-up issues with traditional methods, and they can seamlessly produce a variety of strengths or even dosage forms of medicines. And then finally, and this is a huge point, the advanced manufacturing processes that we incorporate in equipment is in a much smaller footprint than traditional manufacturing platforms. We're talking about, in some cases, 1/10 the footprint required to make the same amount of active ingredients and finished pharmaceutical products. That the equipment can be made portable, it can be moved closer to markets, it can reduce the need for transcontinental shipping of components, and medicines therefore then can be produced at a lower cost. So that's the reason why we think we're going to be able to compete against China, India, these other countries, redo the compound using new novel routes, do it using continuous manufacturing to improve the quality, improve the yield, cut down on the cost, have a more efficient supply chain right here at home instead of having all these disparate parts with all these different hold times that could impact overall product quality and efficiency.
Well, it sounds very, very disruptive to a well-established industry, sort of like cloud computing has disrupted the regular old internet.
This episode is brought to you by the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management, the definitive resource for healthcare management education in North Texas. The center is based in the Naveen Jindal School of Management at the University of Texas at Dallas. It plays a unique role in training the next generation of healthcare leaders to meet local, regional, and national demands. The Jindal School uses its strengths in accounting, administration, finance, marketing, and information systems to educate highly qualified personnel for healthcare administration and executive leadership positions. The center is home to 7 healthcare leadership and management programs, including undergraduate and graduate programs, as well as executive programs for physicians and working professionals. For more information, visit us online at jindal.utdallas.edu/healthcare.
I see the term green chemistry, and is there some environmental sustainability here that's a contributing factor to what you're doing?
Yeah, Bob. So in addition to our ability to provide a higher level of quality assurance, so one of the things that Phlow did is we partnered with the leading global standard-setting organization in the country, in the world, the United States Pharmacopoeia, USP. So USP is coming alongside Phlow. They're building their own lab to help us with these continuous manufacturing processes. So in addition to having an organization like them independently validate the quality of the active ingredients we're manufacturing and the finished medicines, in addition to continuous manufacturing supporting higher yields, better throughput, it also allows for a significant reduction in the toxic environmental waste that is produced through traditional batch manufacturing. So traditional batch manufacturing uses these toxic solvents that you have to incorporate to build the compound. As you're taking these different ingredients and you're putting them together to make this finished compound, you go through a lot of solvents. Continuous reduces that utilization by upwards of 90%, which is a huge green chemistry play. And most importantly, it's just really important as a public benefit corporation. Going back to our environmental, social, and impact-related governance, it ties right into our B Corp and certification process heading in that direction.
Well, when COVID surprised us all, we found out that we were short in supply on a lot of protective equipment. And, it was an eye-opening scenario. We said to ourselves, we can't get it. Where do we get it? How do we get it? And so we're kind of caught short there. When it comes to a long-term national stockpile of these ingredients that you use, what are you doing to ensure that we've got this stockpile, that we've got the things here in this country that are used to manufacture these most essential medicines?
So one of the challenges that we face, whether it's with PPE ventilators or now these essential medicines, is the United States did not only not have a lot of the manufacturing occurring here, but we also do not have what's called surge capacity. So we don't have the ability to have additional capacity when we have those increases in demand to turn on the trigger and manufacture these medicines very quickly when you see those times of increased demand. So what Phlow is doing is we're working with the United States government to establish the country's first strategic active pharmaceutical ingredient reserve. It's called the SAPR. The easiest way for your listener to understand this concept is to think about what we have with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So in our country, we have a Strategic Petroleum Reserve that is in place right now in multiple sites throughout the country, so that when we have challenges in trade, challenges with natural disasters that impact the oil supply, or other issues around the supply and the economics of oil in our petroleum industry, the government can decide to release stores from that Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help bolster and help make sure that we have what we need from an energy perspective at the right price to not impact the consumers in a negative manner. We do not have anything like that from a medicine perspective, except for what's called the Strategic National Stockpile, which you all may have heard being in the news. The problem with the Strategic National Stockpile is, think about the fact that we have over 100 essential medicines in shortage. Those are the ones just in shortage. How would you stockpile hundreds of medicines for millions of potential patients across multiple dosages, concentration, strengths? How could you afford that? How could you predict that? So what we did is we said, there's a better way. Let's create a reserve of the less costly ingredients that have a longer shelf life, and then build a system to be able to turn on the ingredient conversion to the finished dosage form that is in shortage on demand. Within 30 days, if we see there's a benzodiazepine that's used to sedate a patient to get them on a ventilator, and the presentation that we need is a 10 ml vial of that, we take it out of the reserve if we can't find it any other place, or the market can't serve the hospital customers. We get it manufactured into that vial, and we get it into the Strategic National Stockpile for distribution. That's how the SAPR works, and Phlow is very thrilled to be innovating on that front to make sure we have a redundant and resilient supply chain for our critical essential medicines. I'll give you another example, Bob. A sterile injectable vial sometimes has less than 1 year shelf life on it. But these active ingredients have up to 10 years shelf life on it. So you're storing these drugs in the most cost-effective manner with the longest shelf life. There's a better way to do this, and this is part of pandemic preparedness for the next stage to protect America's supply chain and pretty much ensure resiliency and redundancy moving forward.
So don't bake the cake and put it on the shelf. Take the ingredients that you're going to use for the cake and put those on the shelf. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And you know, because some people want chocolate cake, others need vanilla.
There you go. So what we're hearing here, Eric, is, better quality, availability, affordability, better patient care. And today we hear a lot about access, getting the right information, the right medicine, the right treatment to the right groups of people, what we call the social determinants of health, which is really important. And I note here that you're working with a children's hospital coalition. I'd like for you to share with the audience what you're doing there and what the goal is with that.
Well, if I may, Bob, I'd love to take a step back and talk a little bit about how I personally got involved in Phlow, because that leads to answering this question of why focusing on children's hospitals. So
good.
So I got involved in medicine when I was a teenager. I joined the rescue squad, became an EMT, and ultimately a paramedic. I applied to this guaranteed admission program into medical school, and then headed down the pathway to be an emergency physician. Along the way, I also did a PhD in pharmaceutical science, and then started my first company because my brother and I had life-threatening allergies. We had food allergies, and we had almost died from unfortunate anaphylaxis growing up. And we just wanted to solve and create a better solution to the EpiPen that it had existed for decades. So we invented a drug called AviQ. I learned during that process of building a company from the ground up, just the brokenness and the complexity surrounding our essential medicine supply chain, the brokenness around the wholesalers, the distribution system, the pricing and reimbursement system, right, where you have a whole different array of parties that are paid in order to be a part of this complex supply chain. And unfortunately, the ones that have been suffering the most as a result of this overly complex supply chain are the patients. Some of these drugs that we're talking about, Bob, a bottle of Fiji water at the airport costs more than some of these critical life-saving drugs. I saw both through my medical education, through the challenges associated with helping provide medical direction on a rescue squad, where I would go check out an ambulance and the first thing I would come across is a drug box and all the drugs that were in shortage in that drug box in Richmond, Virginia, in America today. Like, how can someone call 911 and not be assured that they're going to have a critical life-saving dose of medicine, the top tier, the number one drug of choice for their family member? Yet that's exactly what we're facing here in America. So I got into this because I started asking questions around why in America do we not have access to key essential medicines? If you think about it, Phlow shouldn't even exist. Phlow's vision is that every American will have access to the essential medicines necessary to sustain life and conquer disease. That vision shouldn't even exist. Yet in this first world country, it does today. And you can only imagine how bad it is across the world. So what we started seeing was the brokenness in these supply chains. I put my white coat back on and was introduced to a leader at one of the leading children's hospitals. And I shadowed leading pediatricians and neonatologists in early 2019. And as I was going through this rotation with them and trying to understand how is it that we have these pediatric drug shortages, I witnessed a neonate die from not having access to a key essential medicine that was available just 3 years ago. I watched as the chief pharmacy officer was scrambling to get other pharmacy directors to try to locate critical essential chemotherapeutic agents for children. I watched as they had to make sacrifices on choosing a drug that was less safe or less efficacious, a third or fourth tier drug, when the first tier drug wasn't available, but it should be. It's an off-patent generic essential medicine. And it was through that experience that we said, no child or no family member should ever have to worry about, are they going to have the medicines needed during a critical life-threatening condition or disease? So we set up Phlow to initially solve for the children's hospital challenges. We partnered with a company called Civica RX, which is a leading nonprofit pharmaceutical company in America. They're focusing on the adult population. And they were nice enough to really help shepherd us in saying, hey, let us help you understand how we're doing this on the adult side. You all do it on the pediatric and rare disease side. And then we started a plan and a strategy, meeting with the FDA, figuring out how we were going to solve for pediatric drug shortages. Then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we saw that there was significant overlap between these drugs for children in their list from the children's hospitals and the drugs you were going to need to treat COVID hospitalized patients. So we pivoted. We started manufacturing and working on these drugs for COVID-19 patients, but all along we said we're going to serve the children's hospital. And so we recently announced that formation of a children's hospital coalition, bringing together some of the nation's most prestigious and distinguished children's hospitals with a common mission and vision, which is to ensure that these pediatric patients never go without the essential medicines that they need. Basically, we heard, Bob, 3 things from children's hospitals. Number 1, we're tired of uncertainty and availability. Number 2, we're tired of dealing with uncertainty around the quality of our medicines. And number 3, we're tired of uncertainty around the pricing. We can't even plan for our pharmacy budget for these drugs. So we're coming back and partnering with them to say, you tell us what to make, and we'll bring you certainty in those 3 areas: availability, pricing, and and quality. And we are thrilled to be kicking off that coalition partnership with almost a dozen leading children's hospitals, and we're hoping to expand it to over 100 in no time at all.
I know what you're doing here. You're really establishing these relationships at the policy level, the regulatory level, at the federal level, and this makes a big change. Are you still a practicing paramedic?
I am, yeah. So even though I'm not practicing as a physician because of my role here at Phlow, I still do give back and provide medical direction with my local volunteer rescue squad. I've been on that rescue squad for over 22 years, and in fact, I'll be on an ambulance tonight. So after my son's baseball game, I'll put on my uniform, head on and jump on an ambulance all night long and respond to 911 calls and as they come to me. And it's a pleasure being able to work with these young paramedics and train them. More importantly, it's always important to stay connected to the patient. And this is what that affords me.
Well, I hope I never see you under those conditions in Richmond when I travel there. But this has been a great conversation. I really focus here on some of the things that you point out on your website. We find them in common with what we're doing at the university. Lifelong learning, you say it's vital to what you guys are doing, and we see the same thing at the university. And the collaboration and innovation, another couple of your key foundational, elements that you base your company off of. So I can't thank you enough. Any final words, Eric, that you'd like to ask our audience or suggest to them?
Bob, listen, we're blessed and fortunate to have an opportunity here. As you mentioned, lifelong learning is one of our core values, and so is servant leadership. And as an impact company, as a benefit corporation, we're here to serve this country, serve our citizens so that no one has to ever deal with drug shortages in the future. And this is a very difficult, challenging thing to do, right? Trying to bring back an entire industrial base that has been lost over decades for these key critical essential medicines is not easy. And in fact, I told my daughter that, not too long ago, who said, "Daddy, tell me about the medicines that you're making." I said, "Sweetheart, we're making the medicines that no one else would make to serve the populations that no one else would serve." And that's really tough stuff, but it's worthwhile. And we come in every single day just so excited and thrilled that we're playing a small role to leave a legacy of security, national public health security for families in the future. And so thank you so much for highlighting Phlow and for the conversation today. And I encourage your listeners to learn more about our causes and to have this renewed sense of hope that there can be pharmaceutical companies that are going to continue to work to try to bring value, affordability, and most importantly, availability of key critical essential medicines in the future.
Well, thank you. A great conversation with Dr. Eric Edwards, the co-founder and CEO of Phlow Corporation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Healthcare podcast. Join us online at businessofhealthcarepodcast.com to find episode links, notes, and more. Be sure to subscribe to the Business of Healthcare podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. To learn more about the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management, go to jundal.utdallas.edu and then search under the Center and Institutes tab on the navigation menu. Also, we want to hear from you. If you'd like to provide feedback, make suggestions for future guests or show topics, or just want to get in touch with us, email us at healthcarebizpodcast@utdallas.edu. Biz is spelled B-I-Z. And let us know how we're doing. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Kaiser, with the Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management, where we're leading change by changing how we lead.